Hello everyone and welcome back to another Far Cry ranking video. A lot of you enjoyed my video on ranking the open worlds, so I figured this time how about we rank the protagonists of the Far Cry series. The protagonists in this series are usually pretty forgettable, with a few exceptions of course, especially when compared to the big villains of the series. However, you're probably wondering how I'm going to do this since half the series protagonists are mute and don't even speak, making it pretty much impossible to rank them. So I will only be including the protagonists who do speak in their respective games, being Danny Rojas, Jason Brody, Ajay Ghale, Jack Carver, and I'm even going to include Rex Power Cult for this video. Again, keep in mind this ranking is entirely my opinion, and feel free to leave your ranking of the protagonists down in the comments. Coming in at last place, we have the Far Cry 1 protagonist, Jack Carver. This is a pretty self-explanatory one to me. For starters, Jack Carver wasn't really meant to be a deep character with any sort of arc or development whatsoever. He's your standard spy movie hero, throwing out cheesy lines and delivering ridiculous dialogue.
Precautions, like not blowing up a nuclear weapon while I'm standing right next to it? What is this? A bad spy movie? You two are gonna get us all killed!
He gets stranded on this chain of islands in the South Pacific where he picks up a gun and just destroys everything in his path, mercenaries and Trigens alike, and he's constantly having to save the classic damsel in distress Valerie for a good majority of the game. However, what is cool about Jack Carver, and we finally got this confirmed a few months ago, is that he's actually the Jackal from Far Cry 2. The hero or protagonist around a decade later is the antagonist slash anti-hero in Far Cry 2, which is a really cool concept. And I actually really like the Jackal as an antagonist, so I'm really glad we finally got confirmation from the developers that the Jackal is indeed Jack Carver. But unfortunately, that's still not quite enough for Jack to be above some of the other protagonists on this list. Coming in at number 4, we have Rex Power Cult from Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. Now, I know a lot of people love this character, and I do too, but I just don't think I can put him above the others, simply because he's essentially Jack Carver but with better voice acting and embracing the corny lines and dialogue. There were so many funny moments in Blood Dragon's story with Rex, and he's an extremely likable character. Again, however, though, it's not like he has any serious narrative or development, and to be fair, he's not supposed to. He's supposed to lead the wacky story of Blood Dragon and provide plenty of comedy, in which I think he did a pretty good job. Now at number 3, this is a bit of a tough one for me, but I'm going with Ajay Ghale, which may contradict some things I've said in the past, which I will explain later. Essentially though, I like Ajay's premise and dynamic more with Kirat, his parents, and Pagan Min more than the actual character himself. It's a really cool spin on the protagonist and antagonist for this series, as Pagan Min in a way sees Ajay as a son, while Ajay sees Pagan as a crazy tyrant that needs to be stopped. It's cool how Pagan and Ajay's mom used to be in love, and the fact that Ajay's mom sent Ajay to Kirat as her final wish, likely so that Ajay would meet Pagan and help him rule Kirat. Ajay is constantly forced to make a choice between the lesser of two evils in Far Cry 4's story, with Amida and Sabal, who both suck in my opinion, and then also with Pagan Min. I really love that part of Far Cry 4's story and how everything feels like it falls under the moral gray area. Each character does some pretty horrible things, but for good reason, and you have to decide between the lesser of two or even three evils. Again though, the only problem is I think I like Ajay's backstory and dynamic with the characters more than the actual character himself. The big story moments usually give you a choice, and honestly, Ajay doesn't even really feel all that present in his own game, and I think it's because they wanted you to feel like Ajay, which in doing so, I'd say for the most part they succeeded. However, Ajay himself felt less present as a character, and ultimately made him feel like a basic protagonist at times. Maybe if they gave him more dialogue or more character moments for him specifically, instead of always putting the focus on Amida and Sabal, then he probably would have been a much better protagonist because he has such a strong backstory. Like, how about a moment where Ajay remembers his mom, or flashbacks even? Just something to make us feel more emotionally invested in the character. So I think ultimately Ajay had a lot of wasted potential, but again, his dynamics and backstory are still really good in my opinion, so that's why I'm ranking him here. At number 2, we have the newest Far Cry protagonist, Danny Rojas. Danny still may not be a perfect protagonist by any means, but you can see some good improvements and innovations in Far Cry 6's story, where the protagonist protagonist more times than not in this Far Cry series can feel like an empty shell. However, the switch to third-person cutscenes may lose a little immersion. At the very least, it made Danny feel more present and noticeable in the story, as you're actually seeing this character talk and interact with others. However, sort of similar to Ajay, I think, Danny had a lot of wasted potential, as Far Cry 6 never really went too deep with the character, nor did it establish consistent themes or a layered character arc. There were hints of possibly something like that, and Danny had some good moments and emotional scenes where they kind of just let down their barrier and give us more insight into their past and struggles. However, I felt those moments were too few. There were also a lot of moments where I thought they would explore Danny enjoying being a killer and being a freedom fighter. As Juan Cortez pointed out, he thinks Danny is like an addict. They need some sort of war or fight as an excuse to kill and blow stuff up. That's a really fascinating and dark way to think about this character, and I wish they explored that further. It would have added a lot more depth to Danny. They also used Danny and their relationship or acts of kindness towards Diego Castillo to make us more empathetic of Danny, which I think they succeeded in. The formula and potential for a really good protagonist was there, but they just didn't quite follow through or execute it. Regardless though, I think it was a big step in the right direction, as I know many people like Danny and prefer this kind of protagonist over Far Cry 5 and New Dawn's deputy and security captain, which were entirely mutes. And coming in at number 1, this should be no surprise to anybody, is Far Cry 3's protagonist Jason Brody. Now if you've seen my Far Cry 3 review, at first I really didn't like Jason, but the more and more I've thought about him and his story, I even made an entire video talking about his specific story, is what to me easily makes him the best protagonist in the series, and I think on that most of us can agree, I hope. He's one of the only protagonists in this series with actual character development and an arc, and it's a damn good one at that. Jason Brody's story is one you wouldn't expect to see in a Far Cry game, or even a video game for that matter, and it's a big part why so many think Far Cry 3 has the best story. Well, that and Voss, but we're only talking about protagonists for now. Jason starts the game as a rich playboy who's likely never had to work a day in his life. He's on these islands with his friends, having fun and partying, until everything takes a very dark turn as they're all captured and he literally watches his older brother die and is forced to take his first life. Then from there on, it's just a complete downward spiral. As Jason becomes more powerful and kills more and more, he comes to enjoy it. He loves being Citra's warrior, and while at first he only killed to survive and save his friends, that soon turns into justice and also just the fact that he likes it. Some psychotic stuff right there, and it's such a dark and bold theme to explore for a protagonist. He's not your classic hero. He's an anti-hero who loses himself in his bloodlust to the point where we as the players and not even his friends can recognize him. However, we still always know that there's a little flicker of light left in Jason, and whether or not he brings that out or snuffs it out is left up entirely to your choice. There's no protagonist, certainly not in this series, that has that level of depth and development, and he's even better after playing the new Voss Insanity DLC for Far Cry 6, where it further reinforces the fact that Citra had Jason wrapped around her finger, and Jason has gone completely nuts trying to kill Voss, and how essentially the two are competing to become her ultimate warrior. Such a cool and unique character for the series, and that to me makes him by far the best protagonist in Far Cry. But again, let me know what your ranking of the Far Cry protagonists I mentioned are, and if you agree with Jason Brody being the best of the series. I'm really curious what you guys think. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like, and if you're new, consider subscribing. I've made a lot of Far Cry related videos on my channel and plan to do more rankings in the future, so stay tuned for that. And other than that, thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day, everybody.